Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast, LDS edition. I am your host, John DeLynn. It's May 22nd, 2024. And we are, 54, 55 episodes into an amazing series called LDS Discussions, where we talk about the Mormon Church truth claims as dispassionately and as objectively as possible so that you, the listener and viewer, can decide how you think and how you feel about the Mormon Church's truth claims. Today's episode, we will be talking about, it's part 4 in our series on the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, to the gold plates. And we're going to be talking about what happened to the 8 witnesses to the gold plates, to the Book of Mormon, and to the other witnesses. This is part 4 in that series. The first episode was the 3 witnesses. The second was the 8 witnesses. The third was the other witnesses to the gold plates. And this is part 4. I say this every LDS Discussions episode, but these episodes are in a series. They're best understood and they're best appreciated in succession, which means what we recommend is you go back to the beginning, watch all 50 whatever, and then watch this one. You'll get much more out of it. Of course, you're welcome if you don't want to do that. You can access the LDS Discussion series as a standalone podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and there's a YouTube playlist on the Mormon Stories Podcast YouTube channel where you can just watch them all in succession as well. Millions of views and listens now have come about from this series. I'm hearing in the past year that this is one of the most important things we've ever done. And of course, it's based on the amazing work of Mike from LDSDiscussions.com website. And then we've brought Julia on now as well. She's been producing and writing and managing some of the episodes. And of course, we're always grateful to have Nemo the Mormon from his YouTube channel with us. Hey, y'all, how's it going?
Good.
Thanks for joining us. Julia, are you tired of the witnesses yet or not yet?
No, I'm actually still fascinated. I went and bought Richard Lloyd Anderson's book about it, and I'm like ready to read that now.
Cool. And you've been reading Grant Palmer's An Insider's View.
Yeah, that one is so good. Yeah, and we'll talk about some of that today too.
Mike, I don't know if you know this, but I've asked Julia to produce at least a few episodes just kind of highlighting some of Grant Palmer's main points from his book, because I think it's an important book. Do you agree, Mike? Do you like Grant Palmer?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to his interviews with you years ago, and I don't remember.
You didn't read his book?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
so
okay.
I mean, I think, I think from what I don't remember a lot of it. I do know there's a lot of pushback to a lot of the points he's making. I know there's a few where I've heard like other people who are, critical or whatever say, yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think a lot of the other points that he makes are good. And they tie in a lot to what we've done already, especially when you talk about how Joseph Smith could have created the Book of Mormon. I know Grant Palmer has a lot of stuff where he looked at like what was taken from the Bible and all that. So there's a lot of work that he did that we're all kind of building off of now, which, is Grant Palmer, Dan Vogel, all those people have done such incredible work. And now we're kind of benefiting from that today.
Yeah. The one part of his book, and I don't know if you got to that part, the golden pot is the part that's most sort of poo-pooed, but I think pretty much everything else stands up. Is that right, Julia?
Yeah, I skipped over that part because I guess I just didn't see it as super, I don't know why, but I skipped over that and then I was reading everything else. So I'm almost done. I just have a few more pages left. But yeah, it's so far as everything else that I've seen, it's really, really good resource.
I want like 4 episodes out of you on this, Julia.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, all right. Cool. All right. So anyway, welcome back. All of you are really excited. Mike, I think you're taking off the summer. Anything you want to say? I guess we could talk at the end too, but I'm grateful to have you before you have to go into hiatus again.
Yeah, no, it's actually good to go into hiatus sometimes. I think, one of the things about doing this for so long is I think there's people who can keep it up for a long time, and then there's people who can't. I'm definitely, I think to a certain extent, when you go through all these topics, it's like, you feel to a certain extent like you're beating a dead horse. And so for me, I am kind of happy to be able to kind of get away from it for a bit, just because I haven't done the last year. I've barely watched any Mormon podcasts and stuff. It's not because I don't find it interesting. I still find it fascinating. But there's also that kind of mental part where you're just like, I've kind of I think John Larson talked about it once where he just says you get to a point where you've kind of like covered it so much that it just kind of gets to a point where you're just like, I just don't want to right now. So,
Wait,
I find it fascinating still.
Does that make me, Julie, and Nemo dead horse beaters? Is that what you're saying, basically?
No, I think you guys are finding different angles of it. It's just for me, like, I think when we started the series, we had all these topics planned out, and then we got through them all, and it's like, oh my gosh, like we went through so many episodes, and it was like we were going quick, and I think that was just too much too quick, and so for me, it was like, yeah, I'm good for a while, but I also have some other projects I'd like to do, so we'll hopefully get to those.
I often say that my superpower is like not quitting.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fun. Julia's brand new to this. I mean, Nemo's been doing this longer than Julia, so
right. So I still feel like I have energy to keep going.
Julie's like a baby.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Well, I think it's really good that the audience are getting to see this. Normally, this is the sort of half-hour chat that we would have before an episode starts, and then John would be like, "Right, let's get going." But John came in today like a man possessed. He was on fire. He was like, "Right, let's get in. Let's get started."
Meaning
we got started, and then we just
I wasn't super late.
Hey, he's just full of vim and vigor today, John.
All right.
Yeah.
Nemo, anything you want to say before we get going?
No, I'm feeling good. I'm fueled. I have my jammy Dodgers. I'm feeling good about life. I'm feeling cheery and cheeky. It's going to be a good episode.
Are they dodgy Dodgers?
No, just jammy ones. Raspberry jam.
All right. Well, Julia, take us home.
Yeah. So if we go to if you put the slides. Yeah. Okay. So this first slide here is just a summary of what we're going to be talking about. And you've already talked about this too, John, but I'll go over it again. So we're going to talk about what became of the 8 and the other witnesses. So we've talked about what became of the 3 witnesses already. And then next we're going to talk about the inconsistencies of the witnesses, which we've already talked about a lot of this already. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the history of metal plates, because I think that's important that a lot of people don't understand that history.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is what became of the 8 witnesses and the other witnesses. Okay. So the church likes to boast that none of the witnesses ever denied their testimonies. But concerning the 8 witnesses, this isn't much of a boast, because 5 of the witnesses died during or just after Joseph Smith's lifetime. 2 of them were excommunicated and 1 of them left the church. And so I made a list of all the witnesses and what happened to them. And it's really not that impressive, like that none of them doubted, because it's really only it's really only a few.
Oh my gosh. Those facts are mind-blowing.
Right. So let me read it.
No one survived the church past 1844.
Right. So for those just listening, we should probably read it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Nima, do you want to read the list?
Sure. So Christian Whitmer died in 1835. Jacob Whitmer was excommunicated in 1838. Peter Whitmer Jr. died in 1836. John Whitmer was excommunicated in 1838. Hiram Page left the church in 1838. Joseph Smith Sr. died, a patriarch of the church, in 1840. Hiram Smith died alongside the prophet in 1844, and Samuel H. Smith died 1 month after his brother, the prophet, in 1844.
Yeah, so there's really like 3 that survived past the 1840s. And
That's perilous. It's perilous being a Book of Mormon witness.
The three lived, so that's fine. So like, but your odds are not. The odds are not in their favor.
No, that's crazy. Wow. Okay.
Do we know what the 2 that died, Christian and Peter? Do we know what they died of?
I don't remember exactly what they died of, but I think Christian died when he was young. Like I think he was a younger man too.
Nemo's thinking poison is what Nemo's thinking.
Oh,
yeah.
That's what they think about Samuel Smith, right? Don't they think he might have been poisoned?
Oh, I think so. Because it was kind of an abrupt death. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was when right after Joseph Smith dies, and then there's that power struggle. And Lindsay Hansen Park has done some podcasts on it. I know she has. I've listened to one of them at least a while back, and it's pretty compelling, but of course it's all somewhat speculative because no one wrote in a journey like in their journal like, hey, I tried to poison Samuel Smith today. But yeah, he seemed to die under suspicious circumstances for sure.
Well, Joseph Smith certainly thought he was being poisoned by Emma specifically. Yep. So no real evidence around that except for what he was just
having that many extramarital relations, should we say, would make one suspicious of their wife and any sort of acts of vengeance she may or may not deem to take, right.
Why were Jacob and John Whitmer excommunicated? Do we have any idea?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I think right now we'll kind
Okay.
of go over that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so for John Whitmer, he was excommunicated on March 10th of 1838. There had been problems with the Curland Safety Society Bank. Their leadership struggle was, and the entire there was leadership struggles, and the entire Whitmer family was excommunicated. Upon his excommunication, John Whitmer refused to give the church the documents and records he had worked on as a church historian. He followed James Strang for a time, and then later joined the Church of Christ, which we'll talk about also.
See, the reference there is Hamer. Is that John Hamer?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So he didn't want to give up his.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because the church tried really hard to get that history. I'm pretty sure they have it now because I think the Community of Christ had it, and so I think the church
Yep.
just got the access to that.
Yeah.
I guess I could
So
only
the
imagine.
joke's on John.
I can only imagine that he didn't want them to destroy the evidence because I don't know. Could we think of any other reason why?
That's a good point. I don't know, like because maybe he was aware that they had been changing some of the revelations in the past. Maybe that's what he was afraid of. I really don't know.
Could just be to
dived
hurt
into
the
that.
church. You know,
Yeah.
he's upset. They've made this attempt to kind of solidify their position in church leadership, and it's not worked out. And so he's like, right, well, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to take my ball with me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to the credibility point, he goes and follows James Strang, which
Mhm.
questions his judgment or his spiritual compass, right?
Right.
Well, certainly from a Mormon perspective, like from a Brighamite perspective, yeah. Because the idea is that he was right because he knew to follow Joseph and he was spiritually in tune enough to follow Joseph and all that sort of stuff. But then if you follow someone else, yeah, that undermines that.
And then him staying true to his testimony of the Book of Mormon
Yeah.
also
Well, I would
plays
also-
into that. Say that again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I was just going to say also from an outsider perspective, it makes you question their credibility if they're, if we're claiming that God can give you the right answer on what church to join and you leave Joseph Smith and you go with James Strang, I mean, that's an issue, not just for the Brighamite church, which of course would say, well, man, the devil let him away. But from anyone on the outside, you're like, these guys had no ability to tell truth from fiction. And we've shown that so many times. But yeah, I think that's one of the issues with a lot of these witnesses. And, we talked about a lot of that, but like the Hiram Page story with the seer stone to me is one of the biggest kind of underspoken stories that these the main two of the three witnesses believed he was getting revelations from God through this rock and a hat. And you just go, they can't tell what's real and what's fake. And that's a pretty clear sign that, when you get into this and you get into the details, you could show how it was done. You could show how Joseph was doing it. You can also show how these people were making mistakes all along the way.
Right. And then like with he still believed in the Book of Mormon, John Whitmer did, even though he's joined the Strang Church and then this Church of Christ. Like, so the Book of Mormon was so different from what the Joseph Smith was teaching at the time. Like it condemns polygamy, except under very rare circumstances or specific circumstances. And then just so many of its teachings were not Joseph added to the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon does not have the fullness of the gospel. So it makes sense for these people to hold to the Book of Mormon but leave the church. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. And the next one is Jacob Whitmer. So not much is known about Jacob Whitmer's excommunication. It could easily have been due to the Curland Safety Society Bank, as was with the rest of the family. He joined the Church of Christ, which is David Whitmer's church, with his brother, John Whitmer, and passed away in 1856, still affirming his testimony of the Book of Mormon, which we talked about earlier, where his kids just have the same kind of copy and paste testimony from their father. So yeah, so he also was excommunicated and joined David Whitmer's church. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then Hiram Page. Mike, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, Hiram Page left the church when the Whitmers were all excommunicated. For at least a year, Hiram Page followed James Strang from March 1846 to April 1847. Records show that on September 6, 1847, William E. McClellan baptized Hiram Page, David Whitmer, John Whitmer, and Jacob Whitmer into his newly formed Church of Christ, or the Whitmerite Church. McClellan had hoped that David would lead the church. Page was ordained a high priest in that church and participated in the ordination of others. Page died on his farm in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, still affirming his testimony of the Book of Mormon.
Thank you. So he also joins the Strang Church and the David Whitmer's church later. It's just interesting to me how all the other witnesses seem to kind of stick together when after they leave the church. It's just interesting.
Okay, talk me through this. So William McClellan, he had the really important journal, right?
Yeah, I just actually bought a copy of it yesterday. Yeah, his journal, he keeps a really rigorous journal, and that's one of the reasons why people can't easily deny that Joseph Smith had lived polygamy, or at least in my mind, because he writes down so many things. So his records are he was very careful in his record keeping.
And you've got McClellan had hoped that David would lead the church. That's not Hiram. I'm just making sure I understand.
Oh yeah, so I was just added that in there. That was probably a little bit confusing, but
No, it's
yeah.
okay. I'm just making sense of it all.
Yeah, we'll talk more about William McClellan and Strang. We're going to talk about these other characters too.
Okay, I'm just reflecting. Like, to me, this shows that the Book of Mormon witnesses just follow whatever. Can we rely on their inspiration? And why were they leaving God's one true church? It makes what I'm getting from this, just trying to be objective, is at a minimum, the church should not tout these guys as credible witnesses based on this account, and that if they are going to tout them, as a point we've made in previous episodes, they owe it to the membership through informed consent to inform the members about what these dudes did afterwards.
I totally agree. I was also thinking as you were talking that these men continue to believe the Book of Mormon. The James Strang's church absolutely believes the Book of Mormon. The Whitmerite church does. The FLDS church does. The Community of Christ church to some degree believes it, not quite as historical. But there are so many other churches that believe the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is not the keystone to the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints.
Dude, Warren Jeffs believes
right.
in the Book of Mormon. Freaking
right.
Deborah Snuffer believes in the Book of Mormon. Like,
exactly.
That means nothing to the church today.
Right. So like as a missionary, you teach, if you find out that this book is true, that means this specific church is true. But that's not true because so many other religions believe that the book is true. So that book being true does not equal.
Yeah.
That's the point I wanted to bring up. Was that the church can't conflate their testimony of the Book of Mormon with therefore the truth claims of the Brighamite sect of the Restorationist movement is true, because there's so many other people that believe it.
Exactly.
No, if they're going to rely on the 8 witnesses, then the Strangite church is true.
Well, for a time, they didn't stick with him forever, but yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the rights and all manner of ites, as they would say.
Well, that's always No, I was just going to say to Nemo's point, that's always what you run into when you talk to people, and there are still a lot of them who say Joseph Smith didn't implement polygamy, Brigham Young did, and it was against God. And I'm like, well, then you're in the wrong church anyways, because if Brigham Young wasn't a prophet, then all of a sudden your authority is gone. And if Joseph Smith did it, which you then kind of concede is wrong because you're saying Joseph didn't do it, then you're screwed either way. And I always find it funny because when you bring that up, then they kind of hop around, as we all do when we're trying to protect our beliefs. But yeah, it just shows sometimes when you really start to focus on this and you make people focus on one specific issue, it becomes a lot more difficult than when you let like the Fair Mormon style response to say the CS letter, where you're jumping all over the place, all sorts of different apologetics that can't work with each other. And that's what you get. And so, yeah, this shows when the credibility is shot, you really then have to question, what does that mean? Because it means a lot. And we're showing that in these episodes.
But then there's a parallel, that I could draw from a sort of more believing standpoint would be that, okay, you've got these people that believe the Book of Mormon is true. For whatever reason, they still believe the things that happened to them, the experiences they had. And a lot of people, when they're leaving the church more broadly, people say, well, what about your spiritual experiences? And the thing that the way I've always looked at it is, well, they are still experiences that you've had. You may just have different explanations for them now, or they may mean different things to you now. And similarly, they may, the witnesses of the Book of Mormon may have gone, right, okay, well, I still believe this book is true, but I've now seen that Joseph Smith is a fallen prophet, because prophets rise and prophets fall, right, to their mind. And God has more than one prophet. They see it through scripture. So they go, right, okay, well, then who's meant to be in charge now? That could be very much their worldview. And you see that analogous today for people that discover a lot of the problems with the Brighamite sect and go, okay, well, I still believe in the Book of Mormon. I still believe the foundational parts of Mormonism in that way. I'm going to go to Community of Christ instead. And you do get people that do that, and they find a home there, and they find that it gives them what they need. So this isn't just like, therefore, Mormon church, everyone should leave. It's like, well, you'd be seeing then and now ways in which people can take parts of the church's narrative and the church's history and take it with them to other places.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, what's next?
Okay, so next we're going to talk about William McClellan. And in one of the other episodes, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been part 1, but I misspoke in another episode. I said William McClellan had another set of gold plates, but that's not true. I misspoke. I said the wrong name. So it was just James Strang and Gladden Bishop who made those claims that they had.
Julia, we're talking Mormonism. You don't need to like own up to your mistakes and apologize. That's like 101.
We neither seek nor request nor offer a apology.
Yeah, exactly. So just
snarky.
Carry on.
We're never.
I was too nice earlier. I need to get some snark out.
We're teasing Elder Donnie Chokes, who's on the record saying we neither seek nor offer apologies. Okay.
Yeah, and he shouldn't have done that when he had such a raspy voice. It just anyway.
All right.
Okay, so William McClellan joined with others to form the Church of Christ, or the Whitmerite Church, in 1847. McClellan called on David Whitmer to assume the presidency, claiming that Joseph had called him to lead. McClellan even visited Oliver Cowdery and Emma Smith and others in hopes that they would also join the church. The church only lasted briefly before it died off. However, years later, in 1875 and 76, David Whitmer started the Church of Christ back up again, this time without William McClellan. And I'm not exactly sure what. It seems like he didn't really want William McClellan in the church the second time around, and I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't done the deep history on that one, the deep dive on that one. But yeah, so William McClellan pushed David Whitmer to start another church because he felt that Joseph Smith had called him. I don't know the evidence on that specifically. Mm-hmm. The family was very convinced about James Strang being called by Joseph, but I haven't seen any evidence so far that Joseph at all called David Whitmer to lead the church. But
then could that not have been part of the leadership debacle that was going on around the Curtain?
That very well could have been. Because in my head, it's just like David, or it's just like Brigham Young is one of the biggest guys. And I guess I don't. And then is it Sidney Rigdon was the other guy?
I mean, Hiram Page was vying for power when he was trying to get his own revelations, right? So a lot of this is all men jostling for power, jostling to make claims that could then put them in a position to lead and this and that, you know, making claims about what someone said to them that God told them to say, etc. There's a lot of that sort of politics going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next one is James Strang, and he's probably the most interesting to me. If you want to put that slide up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep. Perfect.
Okay. John, do you want to walk us through this slide, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So James Strang produced 11 witnesses for his plates. 4 witnesses. Wait, can we say something? Talk about, didn't Joseph Smith, isn't there good evidence that Joseph Smith designated Strang as his successor at some point? And are you going to talk about that?
Well, we'll talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it super in depth, but yes, his family, all of Joseph Smith's family was very convinced that James Strang was called. And we talked about this a little bit, I think, with John C. Bennett, where he produced letters from Joseph Smith's, he said from Joseph Smith, claiming that, or calling James Strang as the next prophet. And so, yeah, we'll kind of go through that. This isn't an episode about James Strang, so I don't go into it super in depth, but.
I mean, I just think it's interesting that we note that not only did a lot of the witnesses follow James Strang, I think they followed James Strang because there was decent suggestion that Joseph Smith had potentially designated Strang as a successor.
Absolutely. And his mother specifically did not have a doubt in her mind that Joseph had called James Strang.
Joseph Smith's mother, not James's mother.
Yeah, Joseph Smith's mother. Sorry, Lucy Mack Smith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So James Strang. James Strang produced 11 witnesses for his plates. Everyone gets plates. You get plates. You get plates. 4 witnesses for his Vori plates and 7 for the sealed portion of the plates, who all signed and never denied their testimonies of seeing the plates. All of the remaining 8 witnesses, John Whitmer, Jacob Whitmer, and Hiram Page, joined James Strang's church. Additionally, of the 3 witnesses, both David Whitmer and Martin Harris also joined James Strang. William Smith, Joseph's brother, and Lucy Smith, Joseph's mother, and his 3 sisters. This is Joseph Smith's 3 sisters, right?
Yes.
Sophronia, Catherine, and Lucy all followed James Strang. They all followed from 1846 to 1847 after the prophet's death. They believed that Joseph Smith truly appointed James Strang as the next prophet. Lucy even wrote in a letter, quote, "I am satisfied that Joseph appointed J.J. Strang. It is verily so." Letter to Reuben Hedlock from Lucy Smith, May 11th, 1846. Oliver Cowdery never did join with James Strang, but his father, William, did. That's William Cowdery.
Mhm.
Oliver did move 12 miles from Strang's home in 1847, but it's unclear what his affiliation was with the church. That is mind-blowing that not only so many of the Whitmers, but Martin Harris and so many of
All of-
Joseph Smith's own family
Exactly.
followed James Strang. That is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Oliver Cowdery was the only witness alive at that point who didn't follow along. Am I understand?
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
And then it is interesting though that he would remove himself and move only 12 miles from Voree, or from where James
I
Strang
mean,
was.
I wonder whether at that point it's just more about he's gone through a lot with these people. These people are a community that he knows, and he wants to be near friends.
And that's true. That
right?
could very well be true. Yeah.
It could be a non-religious sort of social aspect to that, I would imagine. But
Yeah.
just I think we really need to nail this point down for a second, that of all the witnesses alive, only one didn't then go and join James Strang. So if you're the Brighamite Church saying, yes, we were the right ones to follow Brigham Young and this was correct, but the witnesses that you're touting have all gone another way, that's pretty problematic.
Right.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Mike, you want to add anything?
No, I think one of the things that they talked about, or people talked about when I first started looking into all this stuff, and Dan Vogel really hammers this home, is just how this is all a game of charisma. And part of that charisma is getting people to believe you're the one that was chosen by Joseph Smith, because Joseph Smith is the one who is constantly being challenged by others, but ultimately had the charisma to be the person people believe to be a prophet of God. And so, of course, Strang, whether it was something that people really heard from Joseph or whether it was communicated in a way that was then believed, carried enough charisma to pull all of these key people to his side. And as Nemo said, that becomes a problem really quickly when you're trying to also tout these people as having this special spiritual gift from God of discernment and all of the other things, because it just shows how messy all of it is, but more importantly, how it is, one of the things I fall back on a lot, and I'm sure to some people this seems kind of like a cheap shot, but it's like God can send an angel down to tell, little teenage girls, I guess to be fair, the angel would go through Joseph, but that they should marry Joseph Smith. But an angel can't go down and tell these witnesses, like, guys, JJ Strang is not the dude. It just shows how powerless God is in all of this. And it's all about charisma between all of them.
I will say that some of the wives did say that they saw an angel, but yeah.
Kind of. I mean, yeah. So
Checkmate,
usually the angel
Mike.
didn't come. I know. Well, no. I know we covered this in our polygamy episodes, but when they claimed to see angels, wasn't it more just like a light angel in the background? It wasn't like an angel that's like, hey, yeah, we really did tell Joseph that you're to marry and have sex with him, right? Wasn't it more just like
I don't know that they ever
I saw brightness.
Well, one of them,
Yeah.
she said she saw him and then she covered her face and the angel never spoke because she
Yeah. And then Joseph was like, "Oh, you didn't hang around to talk." Like he kind of chastises her for like not
right.
sticking around, and you're just like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, man,
Right.
it's so obvious from our perspective, but yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is we're going to talk about Gladden Bishop. Nemo,
Whoa.
do you want to?
I don't even know that name.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nemo, do you want to read this slide?
Yeah, sure. Before Joseph Smith's death, Francis Gladden Bishop claimed that Joseph Smith was a fallen prophet and was excommunicated in 1842. Just to be clear with the punctuation there, Francis Gladden Bishop claimed that Joseph Smith was a fallen prophet, and then Francis was excommunicated in 1842.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, not Joseph Smith.
Francis
Yeah.
isn't claiming that Joseph Smith was excommunicated in 42.
Yeah, because he said Joseph was a fallen prophet, he became excommunicated.
Cool.
Sorry
Good.
about that.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Afterward, he claimed to have sacred items such as the golden plates of the Book of Mormon, the Urim and Thummim, the breastplate, the Liahona, the sword of Laban, and small silver crown representing the Aaronic priesthood, and a larger golden crown that represented the Melchizedek priesthood. He also claimed to have possession of the lost 116 pages. Surprise, surprise. Those were my words. Martin Harris even followed Bishop for a time. Gladden Bishop also had witnesses to his plates and other items. In his pamphlet, An Address to the Sons and Daughters of Zion, published in 1851, Gladden, through revelation, called on Martin Harris and his own wife Phoebe to be witnesses. My witnesses have borne their testimony before my people in this place, yea, and in my house, even that which my people have built and dedicated unto me in Kirtland.
Yeah. So there's another guy that says,
Weird.
yeah, yeah. So
I mean,
everyone's
if they were made up, anyone could claim to have all those items in their possession, right?
right. And what's interesting to me is that some of those items James Strang said he had, and then even Lucy Mack Smith later said she had the Urim and Thummim. So like, are there several Urim and Thummims? Are there several like swords of Laban? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of confusing because like the sword of Laban was later said to be in a cave that Brigham Young was describing, and it was unsheathed and things like that. So like everyone's saying that they have these different items. So it's just curious and interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And did he have any credibility or reputation with the saints that we know of? Would anyone care, or was he just some rando?
Well, Martin Harris cared. I don't know that he was necessarily random, but Martin Harris joined his church as well.
Okay,
He was a witness for his plates. So like, I don't.
Well, Martin Harris he should be disqualified. It's like if there were a referee, it would be like,
Yeah.
Martin Harris, you're disqualified as a witness.
Right. And even reading, I think it was the book that you were telling me, hang on, Grant Palmer's book. I think it was in his book, but he said that Martin Harris saying that the witnesses only saw it in a vision caused a lot of people to leave the church. And so they're like, oh, I thought these were real. And like, so they just up and left because they just realized Joseph Smith wasn't being honest with them. And so anyway, so more problems from Martin Harris, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. I can't quite find it. I'm always talking about the restored branch of the church because it's a UK branch of the church, but started by Matthew Gill in like the late 2000s or early 2000s, and he claims to have been given records by an angel, and his father is one of the witnesses. And just this pattern repeats over and over again. We kind of we laugh a little bit. Oh, Martin Harris joined in, and yeah, Martin Harris would follow anyone the same way a dog follows anyone with food, right? Anyone that was around, he would just follow, it seems. But he chose. I wanted to point out that Francis Gladden chose his wife Phoebe, and there is a habit of choosing familial members to be witnesses for your book or your movement, the same way that Matthew Gill and his father is also one of his witnesses, and it's
True.
still
Very
going on
convenient.
today.
I'm curious to know. I don't know if Strang was related to any of his 11 witnesses, but that would be interesting to see if that was the case.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do we know who they are?
Yeah, they're listed. I just don't have them.
Okay. All right.
I just don't have them up on here.
Because it would also be interesting to see if any of the Book of Mormon witnesses became witnesses to Strang.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there
There's
were
no
any of the
overlap.
11, but it would be interesting to see if the 11 were related to Strang.
Okay.
His own, yeah. Okay, so this next one we're going to talk about what happened to the other witnesses. So Josiah Stoll, we talked about these in the last episode. Josiah Stoll was one of the men who hired Joseph Smith as a treasure seer or glass looker. He joined the church in 1830, but never left New York. So he left the main body of the saints, and he passed away in 1844. So even though he saw a corner of the plates, I guess it wasn't enough for him to keep going with the saints. So he eventually.
Can I just say that's fascinating? So I had tried to get y'all to confirm my memory, which that Josiah Stoll was the one who hired Joseph and his dad to come help him find a silver mine in the Susquehanna area, and that's how Joseph meets Isaac and Emma Hale. But we all know that no treasure was ever found, and I think it's really important to mention that even though Joseph Smith never found any silver with Josiah Stoll, even though Josiah Stoll paid Joseph to find silver, and Joseph did the whole like, oh, it's there, but it's too far down. Oh, the angel took it away. That Josiah Stoll not only continued believing and testified, I believe, in Joseph's trial, that he still believed Joseph had special powers, even though Joseph never found anything. It's mind-boggling that he joined the church in 1830, because what that shows is that Joseph was able to convince people he had special powers, even when they could see that he didn't. And I think that's kind of important. I think that's important.
Or certainly when the product of those powers, the thing that should have come of those powers, never came.
Yeah.
Like the finding of the treasure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just enough happened that convinced them, because like I think one of the stories was that they were trying to get this treasure chest, and they got the corner of it off, but the rest of it sank into the earth, and somebody was able to keep the corner of this chest. Or the story of the feather, like you mentioned earlier, Mike. Like Joseph will bring them to just far enough, and then they'll be convinced, but they never found any treasure. So
And it's a testament to the power of persuasion or the charisma of Joseph Smith. Like, I think
Yep.
the thing that church apologists have to try and do is paint Joseph Smith as illiterate or uneducated or just inconsequential in any way, when actually what you realize is he has something about him he must do in order to get people to follow him and to keep communities together in this way. There has to be something about him, even if he does have a funny whistle when he speaks,
and an accent.
Yeah.
and an accent.
And I just want to say,
Oh.
I think we need to really understand Joseph's special power was convincing people he had power when he didn't.
Yeah.
That was his special power.
Mhm.
Because everyone
Yeah.
wanted to find someone who had access to God and who had special powers. And he was good at convincing people he had access to God and that he had special powers. When an honest person would say, I don't have special powers, and an honest person would say, I don't talk to God, right? That provides an opening for a dishonest person to claim divine access and special powers to fool people. And that's what charlatans do. So
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, it's like what a psychic does, right? So you go to a psychic and they ask you a bunch of questions and you give them all this information. And when you walk away, you don't think like, oh my goodness, they missed on all of these questions. You think, holy crap, they knew my grandmother died from a heart issue and they were able to connect me to her, and they don't feel like they were duped. You know what I mean? And so Joseph Smith had that same ability of getting people to string them along. And even when he failed, because obviously there's no such thing as guardian spirits guarding treasure, they still felt like even after they wasted their money on it, they were so close. They were so close. And it just shows, when you want to believe something, you can get your mind to believe it, even after you've been lied to and deceived for,
And yeah, Joseph has the
advantage of.
social skills. Joseph has the social skills and the ability to read people, to understand how do I have to talk to this person to get them to feel like it's or either to get someone to feel like it's their fault that something didn't work that he promised, or to get someone to feel like they're both in it together and they've both lost out on this treasure and I'm just as shocked as you are, type thing, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
There's a skill in that, I guess.
Fascinating. Anyway, I didn't mean to derail
Oh,
us.
you're totally fine.
Okay.
So Emma Smith did not join the Saints to Salt Lake. Instead, she supported her son Joseph Smith III, who started his own church, the RLDS Church, now the Community of Christ Church. And so that's how it ended with her. She went off with the RLDS, or Community of Christ Church. So even though she was a witness in a way that she was able to hold them and feel them, she eventually did leave the main body of the Saints. And then Mary Whitmer was excommunicated in 1838 with the rest of the Whitmer family. She moved to Richmond, Missouri, where she lived until she passed away. Lucy Mack Smith, and this is Joseph Smith's mother, she for a time followed James Strang. I'm sorry, I kind of left that blank. So she did eventually rejoin I should say she sort of stayed with the main body of the Saints, to the sense of she gave one of the very few rare times where a woman gives a talk in general conference. She spoke and she said, I'm going to stay here because I can't make this journey, which is probably very wise of her. But so and then she stayed back and she stayed kind of with Emma, but I don't know what her affiliation was with the Community of Christ, if there was any. So yeah, I guess you could say that she stayed with the church, but she did follow James Strang and then come back to the church. Then William Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, was appointed one of the 12 apostles in 1835. In 1839, he was suspended from fellowship for speaking against Joseph Smith. He was later reinstated and published an apology in 1840. In 1845, he was dropped as one of the 12 and as a patriarch of the church. He was excommunicated on October 12th of 1845. He later joined James Strang, was excommunicated from there, and then joined the RLDS Church, or the Community of Christ Church. So I think that he and Brigham might have had some beef, and that's why Brigham didn't want to keep him in. Then Catherine Salisbury, who was Joseph Smith's sister, followed James Strang's church for a time. She did not endorse the teachings of Brigham Young and later joined the RLDS, or Community of Christ Church. She passed away in Illinois. And then Lucy Harris, whom we talked about earlier, she had that dream about the plates. She's Martin Harris's wife. She separated from her husband sometime after 1830. In 1833, she claimed, along with J.W. Stoddard, that Martin Harris was an abusive man and would frequently abuse her, whipping her, kicking her. Lucy even reported that Martin Harris was having an affair with a neighbor. So I thought that was an interesting little perspective of Martin Harris as well. So
Yeah, again, another reason to disqualify Martin Harris from the witness.
Right. He was not a great husband.
Although,
go ahead, Nemo.
I was going to say from a believing perspective, people will say, well, these people aren't meant to be perfect. They can still be valid witnesses of the Book of Mormon and beat their wife, or like we have lost we've lost the position where these men have to be moral in order to be prophets of God, because the excuses come thick and fast. Even when their behavior is patently immoral, people go, well, they don't have to be a good guy. They just have to be listening to God. Which is weird, but that is a position held by apologists and people trying to keep their faith intact.
And if you hold that position, then you have to ask why they couldn't have invited, like, say, a local reporter, a local politician, someone who could actually go in and say, holy crap, Joseph wasn't making it up, instead of people that were related to him and friends and family. But, small details.
The other thing I want to just note is, people like, for let's say Oliver and Martin did return to the church someday. Like, what does that really mean? Like, William Smith returned to the church, but eventually was dropped from the 12, excommunicated, and then joined Strang, was excommunicated, and then joined the RLDS church. Like, I think this sort of speaks to the point that once your fame, your status, your reputation is tied to Mormonism, you're a nobody outside of a Mormon context. And so if William would go as far as to join Strang or the RLDS church, it's got to be because no one would care about him otherwise. And that speaks to me to the relevance of Oliver or Martin eventually coming crawling back as witnesses to the church. I don't think that means much other than life gets super hard and you'll be celebrated as a celebrity wherever people will celebrate you,
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of social capital in being the brother of the man that put the Book of Mormon in everyone's hands, right? Yep. However he did it. There's a lot of capital in that.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder about, like, Martin Harris joining Gladden Bishop and being a witness for his plates, whereas eventually he did leave Gladden Bishop's church and he rejoined the main body of the saints. I wonder if Gladden's church just didn't take off as well as the Brighamite church, or if there was just more to be found in the main body, like the more fame, I guess, if you're going to go that route.
Yeah. But again, it just speaks to how these people just in general are not credible people. They're just not.
Right.
And spiritual witnesses aren't credible ways of discerning truth.
Right.
Just full stop. We were doing an episode on Heaven's Gate recently, about this cult in Southern California that ended up, all dying by suicide. And they all bore their testimonies just like Mormons do. Their testimonies of Marshall Applewhite and Doe and T, and how they know that when Hale-Bopp comes and the space saucer comes, that when they die, they're going to go up to the space saucer. They were crying and saying that their testimonies were true, just like a believing Mormon. And I think all of this just condemns Mormon epistemology, that our feelings can tell us whether something's true or not. All our feelings tell us is that something feels good. That's all our feelings can tell us.
Right.
Anyway, all right, let's keep going.
Okay, so all of those who left the church still had great reason to defend their testimony of the Book of Mormon, which we talked about, as it was a continued part of their religious experience. So again, just because they held to the Book of Mormon, so many other religions hold to the Book of Mormon, it doesn't mean that this church is true.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, so now we're going to talk about the inconsistencies of the witnesses. Sure.
Just real quick point is that is why you possibly never growing up will have ever realized that the fundamentalist church believed the Book of Mormon, right? It's often news to a lot of people later in life that, hang on, these other people believe the Book of Mormon too? Because we almost try and make the Book of Mormon just as in the Brighamite sect. We're like, no, this is just us. We're the only ones that believe this. So no, actually, it's the fundamental extra scripture of a lot of these groups.
Yeah, Yeah, so many other churches. Yeah, not just the FLDS, but yeah,
Mhm.
I didn't know that either as an active member of the church. So that's a good point.
Well, because the church doesn't want you thinking that Warren Jeffs is teaching from the Book of Mormon,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's not going to help them.
Mhm.
And one thing they
Sorry,
really don't
go.
want you to know is that, well, I mean, no, and to your point, and this is something I never thought of as a believing member either, is that because you always hear, like, when people talk about the fundamentalist sects, they always make it sound like they just have their own crazy ways. But it's like, no, they actually believe in the Book of Mormon, and they take literal the fact that DNC 132 is still canonized, which, whatever we want to say about the official proclamation, DNC 132 is still there. So you could make an argument. I mean, I think it's fundamentalist sects are horrible, but you can make the argument that they're living the truer church as Joseph Smith would have foreseen it than what Russell Nelson is leading today in a more mainstreamed kind of we're just like all the other Christian kind of sects that Mormonism is doing with what they're watering down today. But yeah, I mean, not only do they believe the same things that the Brighamite sect believes, but you can make an argument that they believe the church as Joseph Smith and Brigham Young saw it more than we do today.
Yeah, and I think you can see that with some of the other doctrines. If I'm not mistaken, they believe in the blood atonement and the Adam God doctrine. I think that the FLDS still holds to those. And so because of that, it sort of gives a little bit more credibility to our church history in the past of us teaching those things of blood atonement and
Yeah.
Adam God. Yeah.
Okay. Inconsistencies of the witnesses.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of these before, but I wanted to make this point. So for the 8 witnesses, Hiram Page never claimed outside of the witness statement that he handled the plates. Jacob Whitmer's remaining testimonies are the same, and they do not say that he saw or handled the plates. And we have no further testimonies from Peter Whitmer Jr. and Christian Whitmer. So in taking Hiram Page's testimony of, quote, what I saw, as not specifically saying that he saw the plates, then only half of the witnesses made outside claims of seeing and handling the plates. So you have John Whitmer, who we have multiple testimonies from him. You have Joseph Smith Sr., who I think only has one other testimony outside of the witness statement, and Hiram Smith, and then Samuel Smith, who I think only has 2. And then so the rest of them, Hiram Page, Christian, Jacob, Peter, they don't say anything. So only half of them have.
Go ahead, finish your sentence.
Yeah,
Sorry.
only half of the witnesses, half of the 8, say anything else outside of the witness statement.
And when you add to this that the witness document that we have appeared to have been signed by a single person, not them, that adds to the question of whether the 8 witnesses statement was problematic for many reasons, right?
Yeah.
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 Not to mention their craziness as individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
Their magic worldview and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so when and where did they see the plates? So Lucy Mack Smith said that the 8 witnesses repaired to a grove, and there they saw the plates. John Whitmer said that four of the 8 witnesses viewed the plates in Joseph Smith's house. John Whitmer is not sure where the other 4 witnesses saw the plates. Some have tried to say that the other 4 saw them in a grove so as to make both stories true, which I think is an interesting apologetic thing to say. But so there's inconsistencies on where it took place, and in the witness statement we don't have any. That doesn't say where it took place, nor does it say when it took place.
Okay. So problems with the details.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this is also really interesting to me. So what did they see? So Joseph Smith Sr.'s description of the plates, as we talked about before, is so very different from the rest of the witnesses. And I have little pictures here that I sketched.
Oh, nice work. Nice artwork, Julia.
Yeah, so the one on the right is Joseph Smith Sr.'s description. It's longer, it's thinner. It doesn't, and he says several rings, which could be, I guess it could be 3, but I put 4 on here. And then the other plates is the one that the other witnesses describe as 8 inches by 6 inches by 6 inches. And then there's a sealed portion, which Joseph Smith Sr. never describes. So they're super different in the way that they're being described. And then Josiah Stoll says that the plates were of a greenish cast, yet no other witness described them this way. And then Orson Pratt, who was not a witness at all, claims that the plates were stained with a black hard stain, which no one else describes. And so even
that maybe Joseph was using different plates at different times to try and, convince people. And he was always hiding them with the cloth anyway. Why is he hiding them to begin with? And then if people are seeing different colors, it casts doubt on whether he was just making different types of plates at different times to please people, right?
Right. So it's just super inconsistent. Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
like the color, the sizing, it just sort of feels like Joseph's maybe not using the same prop throughout the history, if he is using a prop.
It's kind of like the first vision.
Yeah, where he gets, yeah. I
Yeah.
think most of what Joseph goes through is it gets sharper over time rather than duller, which is how history and memories work.
Yeah.
But,
Interesting. Got
yeah.
it. Okay.
Okay, so this is one we've talked about before, but I just think it's really important. So how thick were the plates? Mike, do you want to actually read this one, or Nemo,
Yeah, I can read it.
if your voice?
Emma
Okay.
Smith. That's fine. Emma Smith said the plates were pliable like thick paper and would rustle with a metallic sound when the edges were moved by the thumb, as one does sometimes thumb the edges of a book. David Whitmer said the pages are thick as parchment. John Whitmer said that the plates were just so thick the characters could be engraven on both sides. Martin Harris said that they were of the thickness of plates of tin. And Orson Pratt, who was not an actual witness of the plates, said that the plates were not quite as thick as common tin.
Thank you. So I was just thinking, John, you have, and I think Nemo, you have a copy of the plates too that are made from tin from one of the viewers of Mormon Stories, and they are not pliable like paper. It's very sturdy metal. And even as I'm reading this, so David Whitmer and Emma and Martin and Orson never handled the plates. Emma's the only one who actually of all this list. Oh, I guess John Whitmer too. So Emma got to feel them, and John Whitmer is saying that he also got to feel them, and then he's saying that they were engraven on both sides. I don't know. I just feel like that it's very inconsistent with what we know about metal and engraving on both sides.
And I find it really interesting that Martin Harris described them as the thickness of plates of tin, almost as though that's what they were. Yeah, it actually strikes me as a really sort of weird descriptor.
Right.
Given that one of the leading theories for a prop set is that they were just plates of tin.
I
Like,
get tin feels a lot differently than gold.
it's a lot lighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, lighter.
So tin's lighter than gold.
Yeah.
I'd say. Yeah, it's less dense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's at this point where I just think it's silly that we're even talking about it. It's like, can hobbits beat elves? You know, it's so silly at this point. I know, Mike, we've talked about that before.
Don't set Mike off.
That's why I mentioned it at the first episode. This reminds me of the Book of Abraham to a certain extent. The Book of Abraham is a lot more concrete as far as Joseph just being flat out wrong on what he was saying he was doing. But to a certain extent, once you realize that their stories are changing, and yet they kind of like, I'm trying to think of the word here, where they kind of combine them all into one very solid, fluid story. And you know that now they're willing to kind of brush over some of these inconsistencies to create that cohesive story. You already know the official statement of the Book of Mormon is not how it happened. We can all argue as to whether or not they had an experience, but we know that the way that the three witnesses in the Book of Mormon is portrayed did not happen based on Joseph Smith's own history. So once you have those details, now the burden shifts to them, because now you know they've already fudged details to make it a more cohesive story. And so to a certain extent, this could be a very short this 4 episodes could have been a short episode saying, here's what they said happened. Here's what we know from their own words happened. It's not credible. I mean, it really does boil down to that.
Yeah.
But you know us, Mike, we like to drag things out here at Mormon Stories. That's how we do it.
No, that's funny. But also, no, I mean, if I have one thing I've learned over the past 20 years, is that Mormonism doesn't wash off. If you've been raised in a high demand religion with all this education / indoctrination for decades and decades, if you taught it, if you believed it, if you knew it was true, it takes people decades sometimes to distance themselves or rewire their brains from the conditioning that they obtained as a devout member of a high demand religion or cult. That's just a fact. So people can't, that's why Mormon Stories exists. People can't get enough of processing and learning and deprogramming their conditioning.
Well, yeah. And I think when I did the website, it was like, okay, so you're doing these topics that should be pretty straightforward and simple. Like if you talk to someone that had nothing to do with Mormonism, and I'm just curious the Book of Abraham, because I feel like there's parallels here, it wouldn't take long for them to go, oh my goodness, this guy made it up horribly. But if you were to do an episode that was 30 minutes and you say, this is what Joseph Smith said it said, this is what it actually says, this is when he said it was written, this is when the church even admits it was dated to, blah, blah. Then you have a lot of apologetic podcasts and websites. We'll just say like, Fair Mormon, Book of Mormon Central does this crap all the time. And they'll then plow through what you don't say. And it sucks because it's like, we shouldn't have to go through all these details. But if you don't, then they'll go, isn't that funny that they left this part out? Well, no, it's not funny. It's just irrelevant. And more to the point of plates, go watch I implore all of you, go watch the presentations from Book of Mormon Central on historicity of plates in ancient America in the old world. And just think about what they're not telling you, because it is one of the most dishonest, weaselly approaches to apologetics you'll ever see, because they'll use words like this could mean this, or this shows the technology existed somewhere else. But nowhere will you find one single example that fits what you need for the Book of Mormon. And they've given presentations, firesides. And so if you're a believing member and you see that, you go, oh my goodness, these critics are totally lying to us. No. The apologists are picking out these little data points that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. And they're blowing it up to say, well, this could fulfill this requirement. It doesn't. So we have to do 4 episodes on the witnesses, which really should be a half-hour episode, because you have to cover these points, because if you don't, then you've got a lot of people that will try to drive these semi-trucks through and say, well, look at what they didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do it. So I apologize for all of you people that are like, why are we beating this dead horse? It's because, yeah, and it really is because, and that's why when I did the website, I was constantly reading apologetics and then putting it back into these topics and saying, here are the common apologetics. Here's why they don't work. You need to, because otherwise, and I've gotten this so many times, well, here's a Fair Mormon article. Why didn't you address it? It's like, well, 1, I did address it. And 2, the reason it's crap is XYZ. I can go up against any of that and explain why it's bad. Whereas apologetics, when they do it, they just dance around, expand the universe and say, here's what they're not telling you. And so I'm sorry to go on this little rant, but it is important as to address why we have to go into such detail on something that's not credible.
Well, to wrap that, I guess you'd say that expanding the universe is key, because what they've done is, if you only addressed the Hill Cumorah, or if you only address the archaeological problems with the Book of Mormon as they exist in the North American model, they would go, but what about all this in South America? And you have to go, well, yeah. Joseph Smith and everyone that was contemporary to his time believed it all happened here. It was in the was in the footnotes of the Book of Mormon that it happened here for a very long time.
Yep.
Until the early 1900s. So that's why I'm not addressing all these things. And that's the problem with them kind of expanding the universe and doing that. Sorry, John, I'm the one who complains about it being too long, because I'm a young man with no attention span thanks to TikTok.
I don't believe it.
Nemo. Well, no, and I'll make one more point just because Nemo's point is good. So let's just say this: my fist is like the Book of Mormon universe, where they come to an unpopulated place that was cleared up by the flood, and you're like, DNA shows that that's not what happened. And then you've got these apologists who will write articles basically, and I'm paraphrasing because they don't actually say this. They'll say, you dumb idiots, you didn't realize the world is actually here. So Book of Mormon was here, but this huge world existed. It's like, no, it didn't. And when they send the scriptures that they say refer to it, when you read them in context, they absolutely do not refer to there being these larger populations. And so that's where apologists continue to expand the universe, because you have to, because if you stay within the universe that was written, and Joseph Smith described it as all of the prophets of Mormonism described up until DNA proved that that wasn't the case, you're screwed. So you have to go bigger. And then when you go bigger, you don't address the actual issue. You just give you reasons why, if you just believe a certain way, it could work. It's similar to any other conspiracy, whether it's Bigfoot. And I'm not equating the two. I'm just saying that's where you go.
But it's almost the same as the pattern Joseph Smith established right at the beginning, where it's always over the next hill. It's always buried just a little bit deeper. It's always just beyond the reach of the treasure diggers, right? You just need to have a little bit more faith. You just need to do a little bit more this, just do a little bit more that, and then it'll all make sense. It's always just 100%. Over the horizon. Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
And there we go.
Oh, go ahead. Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and on that note, let us move on.
All right.
So I found a source that I thought was pretty interesting. Not this one specifically, but the next one. So in the question of did they sign the witness statement? So according to the Deseret News article published in November of 1878, David Whitmer confirmed that the 3 witnesses signed their own names. In an interview with David, Orson Pratt and Joseph F. Smith stated, Nemo, do you want to actually read this one?
Yeah. We found that the names of the 11 witnesses were, however, subscribed in the handwriting of Oliver Cowdery. When the question was asked Mr. Whitmer if he and the other witnesses did or did not sign the testimonies themselves, Mr. W replied, each signed his own name. Then where are the original signatures? David Whitmer said, I don't know. I suppose Oliver copied them, but this I know is an exact copy. Someone suggested that he, being the last one left of the 11 witnesses, he sought to certify to this copy. Lawyer D. Whitmer, Jacob's son, suggested that he had better reflect about it first and be very cautious. Joseph F. Smith suggested that perhaps there were 2 copies of the manuscript, but Mr. Whitmer replied that according to the best of his knowledge, there never was but the one copy. Herein, of course, he is evidently uninformed. Because he has to be, because again, we have to expand the universe that there might be another copy somewhere to avoid all the problems. Sorry, Julia, go on.
Right. No, yeah, that was what I was going to say. And then I also think it's interesting that David Whitmer's son, Jacob, is a lawyer, and he's like, be careful what you say. I thought that was really interesting. But also then I found this other source. This is 7 years after this other one from the Deseret News. So in an interview that took place on June 28th of 1885, so that's, again, 7 years later, with James Henry Moyle, David Whitmer gave a different answer as to whether they signed the witness statement. The witnesses did not sign the original manuscript, though they were present and ordered Oliver Cowdery to sign for them. Moyle himself noted in his diary, quote, this is him talking, the statement that the 3 witnesses did not sign the manuscript, but that Oliver Cowdery signed for them and at their request is doubtless true as to the copy which David Whitmer had. The writing itself indicates that. So he's saying that it's all in Oliver Cowdery's handwriting. This makes total sense. Joseph Fielding Smith, church historian, says his father said that in his interview and that of Orson Pratt, David Whitmer admitted that the 3 witnesses signed the original manuscript. So he's saying that there's 2 different statements that are being made. This earlier one from David Whitmer with his interview with Orson Pratt and Joseph F. Smith. And I just thought that was really interesting because, like, why would David Whitmer say 2 different things? Why would he say that at first they did sign, and then later he say that they did not sign?
Because the lawyer told him to be very careful.
That's sketchy. That's sketchy.
Right.
Okay.
And then additionally, in the same interview with James Henry Moyle and David Whitmer, this is Henry Moyle talking. Mr. David Whitmer Sr. did not handle the plates. Only seen saw them. Says Martin Harris and Oliver Cowdery did so they say. Says he did see them and the angel and heard him speak. But that it was incredible that it was through the power of God and was possibly in the spirit at least. He then spoke of Paul hearing and seeing Christ, but his associates did not. Because it is only seen in the spirit, I was not fully satisfied with the explanation. It was more spiritual than I anticipated. So that's James Henry saying that I wasn't satisfied. So this is another source of them saying that this is a spiritual occurrence rather than a physical one.
And that's what Grant Palmer brought to us, to our attentions, this idea of a spiritual witness versus a physical witness. But the whole point of having witnesses and of, publishing their statements is to give everyone the impression that something physical, corporeal, temporal happened, because anybody can have a vision or a dream of anything, including Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow and Julie Rowe, right?
Yeah, if the plates aren't physical, then there's no point in any of these statements.
Yeah.
In any of
Because what I always understood was that the 3 witnesses were there for the spiritual witness and the 8 witnesses were there for the physical witness, right? That's, because the 3 saw, but the 8 held. And so if the ones that held didn't actually hold, then what are they for? What use are they?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then so adding these ones that we've talked about earlier today and then in the previous episodes. So there's 3 more sources. There's Theodore Turley. He says that John Whitmer said that the plates were shown by supernatural power. And then Thomas Ford, which we discussed earlier in another episode, the 8 witnesses looked into an empty box and were persuaded that they saw the plates. And then this one with James Henry Moyle, he says that David Whitmer saw the plates through the power of God and was possibly in the spirit at least, much like Paul in the book of Acts. And so with these 3 sources, we added to the 10 that we talked about earlier, we now have 13 accounts of the witnesses seeing only a vision of the plates and not in reality.
Oof.
Yeah. Mike, are you able to read that list for the people for just to recap everything?
Yeah. So Stephen Burnett said, vision or imagination, all hesitated to sign already written testimonies. Jesse Townsend said, that Martin saw the plates with spiritual eyes. John A. Clark said that Martin saw the plates with the eye of faith. Anthony Metcalf said Martin passed into a state of entrancement and saw the angel and plates. John H. Gilbert said that Martin saw the plates with a spiritual eye. Reuben P. Harmon said Martin saw them only in a spiritual vision. John Murphy said that David said that the experience was an impression. The angel had no appearance or shape. Anthony Metcalf also said that David said, "Of course we were in the spirit when we had the view," and agreed with Martin that it was being in a vision. Zenas H. Gurley said David said that they did not handle the plates and it was only a holy vision. Edward Stevenson said the witnesses were favored with a vision. Theodore Turley said John Whitmer said that the plates were shown by a supernatural power. Thomas Ford said the 8 witnesses looked into an empty box and were persuaded that they saw the plates. James Henry Moyle said that David Whitmer saw the plates through the power of God and was possibly in the spirit at least, much like Paul in the book of Acts.
Thank you.
That's a lot of problematic statements. That's a large number.
Yeah, it is. And so if you take all the witness statements ever made, and this is only a fraction, like Richard Lord Anderson was saying, that it's only like 5%. I still think that this 5% is a really good, I don't know what the right word is. It's a really good way to reframe everything. Oh, if some of them say it was vision only, then it's possible that all of it is vision only. It doesn't. Yeah.
And this may be an obvious point, but like, how many of us have ever actually seen an angel standing there face to face? How many of us have ever had any sort of ancient artifact delivered to us so that we could touch it? Literally none of us that are sane. And
Mike's claiming it.
Mike did?
Yeah, Mike's claiming to.
Mike, tell us. I'll join your church.
I can't. but my uncle, my wife, my brother-in-law, my sister, they can all claim it. I mean, like, I'm being facetious. I try not to be facetious on these episodes, but this is where you go with this stuff. And to Julia's point, and I know there's going to be pushback from people who watch this and say, well, you're not focusing on all of the statements that promote faith. And that's true. But, I've said this a lot in this 4-part series, that go to a Mormon ward on a Sunday and give this story and talk about the discrepancies, but don't say it's Mormonism. Say it's for the Strangites, whatever. They will all tell you, oh yeah, they made it up because God wouldn't let them go to the wrong church. They wouldn't give misleading statements. And that's the point. The point is that when you're born into it, when you join not knowing this stuff, you then make excuses for why there's these differences and why they have these discrepancies in really basic details. But from the outside perspective looking in, it is really obvious that there are a lot of issues with this story. And this doesn't even get into the historicity of the Book of Mormon and the plates to begin with. So I think to Julia's point, the 5% are what give you the ability to get a deeper look, because it's almost like if everybody gave the exact same story throughout their lifetime, either it happened and it's rehearsed, or it happened and they're not making it up. But if they're starting to tell different stories, there's a reason for that. They're not just misremembering these really important details.
And also the fact that so many people in the 19th century were laser focused on trying to figure out what really happened, all the way into the late 1800s, you've got even like high-level Mormon church leaders trying to hunt down Harris or Cowdery to say now, or Whitmer, like, what happened again? Like, can the fact that so many people, including faithful Mormons, spent so much time trying to figure out what really happened and nail that down sort of validates not only that I and all of us are wondering now, but that people back then were clearly not convinced or sure about what happened. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's totally right.
Yeah. Why were so many people talking about this and asking about it and interviewing them in the 1870s and 1880s? It's because there was always question about the corporeal, physical, tangible legitimacy of their claims.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And why was there an uprising in Kirtland that was specifically focused on the fact that all these people in the church were just finding out for the first time that the 3 witnesses never actually held the plates because it was a vision? Like, that's not critics just making this up and throwing it back in the discussion. This is a hot topic issue at the time. This is a contempt. This isn't even like 50 years later. This is at the time. And all these people are finding this out for the first time. They're not making that up. I mean, the fact that we have multiple documents and accounts of this, and then Martin Harris even has to go back and try to kind of right the ship after he causes the stir. These are real things that you have to deal with. And so again, back to Julia's point of, Richard Lloyd Anderson, right? Saying, well, 95% of them are consistent. Well, that's fine. But the fact that these are inconsistent and everyone in the church is like, wait, what? That is something you can't just brush aside and say, well, they got it right 95% of the time, so that 5% isn't an issue. No, it's a huge issue because it tells you that the accounts in the Book of Mormon are not as they actually happened.
When the stakes are this high and the amount of people's lives and people's belief systems that rests upon these witnesses and what these people are saying, like, that's why these things matter. I know we've talked about why the witnesses don't really matter, but they matter because of the stock that people place in them. Yep. And when it's at that level, and if that's God's mechanism for ensuring that people have a reason to see the Book of Mormon as credible, then that 5% is unacceptable. I would argue, right? That's a fly in the ointment that shouldn't be there.
Or, I think I may have used this example in an earlier episode, but imagine you suspect your spouse of cheating on you, and 95% of the time you can't find any evidence they're cheating on you, but then 5% you can. You wouldn't go, I'm so silly. 5%, that's nothing. You'd be like, holy crap, this dude is cheating on me, or this,
Unless we subscribe to this version of the Mormon God that likes to trick people and likes to create problems for people's faith, right? Because that is the retreat of apologists to go, well, this is a test of your faith. And you have to ask, just how many reasons to doubt would God give you? Compelling reasons to doubt would he give you before you go, well, maybe am I meant to? Is he really trying to get me to believe this? Because he's undermined the witnesses he sent me. He's made the details of the vision that the prophet received unclear because he's given multiple accounts of it. He's made it against the laws of physics for the plates to exist and operate as Joseph Smith said they were. All these sorts of things, right? And you're like, how many of those are meant to be trials of my faith before I kind of just throw my hands up in the air and go, you're a difficult person to deal with?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. All right, we're not letting Julia get through these slides, but that's
no, you're fine.
No,
everybody should screenshot this slide and then go read Grant Palmer's book on an insider's view.
So good. Yeah. And I'm not going to say that this is all of them, but this is just the ones that I was able to gather. So there might be more.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the fact that the buried metal plates was a common part of Joseph's milieu. It was just super well known. And I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but I'm responding specifically to one apologist who claimed that because
them out. Call them. You don't have to.
Well, anyway, so this apologist said that because everyone was of the mindset that no records were buried on metal plates, that any records buried on metal plates is a credibility.
Is a win.
Yeah, is a win. It lends credibility to Joseph Smith's story. And this all mostly stems from The Golden Bible by M.T. Lamb. And John, if you throw that back up there. Okay, so there's a quote.
Published when?
1887.
Okay.
Actually, I kind of think it came earlier, but the one I have is 1887.
Okay.
That's probably not correct because I think the
I can look it up while you're reading it.
Okay, perfect. Because I think the Tanners talked about that being an earlier source.
Yeah.
But Nemo, do you want to read that big block of text from the book?
Some apologists have tried to use M.T. Lamb's ignorant statement concerning golden plates as a way to bolster the testimony of the 3 and 8 witnesses. In his book, The Golden Bible, M.T. Lamb stated, "But after a very careful study of the Book of Mormon, a conscientious and painstaking examination of all the evidences he has been able to gather, both for and against it, the author of these pages has been forced to reject every one of the above claims. He is compelled to believe that no such people as are described in the Book of Mormon ever lived upon this continent, that no such records were ever engraved upon golden plates or any other plates in the early ages, that no such men as Mormon or Moroni or any other of the prophets or kings or wise men mentioned in the book ever existed in this country, that Jesus Christ never appeared upon this continent in person or had a people here before its discovery by Columbus. In short, that no such civilization, Christian or otherwise, is as is described in the Book of Mormon, ever had an existence upon either North or South America.
Thank you. So MT Lamb has a rather ignorant view, regardless of when this was published. So
it was 87.
It was 87.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that in the newspapers, the Golden Bible was a very big thing. It was being spread around, and so Joseph was responding to the Golden Bible problems in his lifetime, but this was published after his lifetime. But in this book, he's saying that because there are no metal plates and there's no evidence of ancient civilizations here in the United States or otherwise or around there, then the Book of Mormon is not true. And this is just a very ignorant view, because we'll go through that was everyone thought that records were kept on ancient records were kept on plates by these people that were living here. And we know from evidence now that you have a lot of Native American tribes were all over the United States. So it's just a very ignorant perspective.
Even if you could look at it and you could have someone coming out as contemporary Joseph Symes saying no peoples ever wrote in a language that consists of pictograms, right? You could have someone come out and say that, even if Egyptian hieroglyphics were fairly well known at the time. But that ignorant statement doesn't make the discovery of hieroglyphics proof that the Book of Abraham is correctly translated or a true ancient record of Abraham, right?
Right.
Because you have to then look at the details of what has been found. So, for example, you look at the Pyrgi tablets, and you look to the details of gold plates that have actually been found, and you're like, look, see, people didn't think they were around, and now we found them. Yes, but what does our discovery of them now tell us about the way they operate? That physically it wouldn't be possible for you to write a book at the length of the Book of Mormon on plates like that.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to steal any thunder there, but
no, and that's why I like I said, if anyone watching or listening to this, go look up Book of Mormon Central episodes on the historicity of metal plates, and just kind of look at the examples they give, and then do your research, hop on Google, search to see what the text actually is. And what you'll see is the text is not long records. And they give this one example of these, I think it's like a set of laws or rules, and it's like outside of an ancient courthouse kind of setup. And I think there's 4 of them. And when you look at the picture, like, holy crap, these are a lot of writing on metal plates. I want to say it's 1,500 words over 4 massive things. So again, you're talking 270,000 words. And that's why they kind of jump around from one example to the next. And they try to, I don't want to say they're distracting on purpose, but they don't settle in on the fact that none of these, not one example, is going to be remotely comparable to what the Book of Mormon plates need to be. And on top of that, as Julia will continue after I stop my rant, the idea of plates was well known at the time. And so all of these things are fitting together to where Joseph Smith would absolutely use a story, just as he did with the fascination over Egyptian artifacts and whatnot, plays into how he deals with the Book of Abraham. This is something in the milieu, which is why Joseph Smith incorporates it.
You've got slides on that, Julia?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so we're gonna go through some of the what was in Joseph Smith's milieu about the plates.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is from An Insider's View of Mormon Origins by Grant Palmer, which is what we've been talking about. This is a great book. Everyone should go purchase it. But he says, believers and skeptics alike report that they physically hefted the box and handled something through a cloth. The weight, size, dimensions, and rings running through the metal were described by Martin and Lucy Harris, William Smith, Emma Smith, Isaac Hale, and others. According to Dan Vogel, the literary phrases of Joseph Smith's day in 1823 described how the ancient mound builders and Jews were thought to have preserved their writings. They were said to have fashioned books of brass connected together by the rings at the back in stone boxes. These ideas may have been Joseph Smith's inspiration for making a plate-like object to persuade belief. And so that's what we're going to go through in these next few slides is what could have inspired Joseph Smith's making this object, if that is the route that you want to go, because we've shown that the plates, or in my opinion, the plates are not actually a real physical thing.
Okay.
Okay, so this is Dan Vogel wrote a book called Indian Origins of the Book of Mormon. Mike, are you able to read this block of text?
Julie doesn't like me.
Says, Joseph Smith was certainly not.
Sorry.
It says Joseph Smith was certainly not the first to claim the discovery of a stone box, metal plates, or an Indian book. According to various accounts, some of the North American mounds also contain metal plates. Plates constructed by the Indians were usually made of hammered copper or silver and were sometimes etched. Given the currency of such stories, Joseph Smith's own claim that he found a stone box, metal plates, and an Indian record in the hill near his father's farm certainly would have seemed credible to his money-digging friends as well as to others of his contemporaries.
Thank you. So yeah, so this is on everybody's minds. I think this is one of the reasons why, kind of like what you talked about, John, with Josiah Stoll, where he really thought that there was buried either records or metal plates or gold or whatever, silver. And so that's why it was so easy for him to believe, and so many others to believe, that Joseph Smith's story was true, is because they all had heard about it.
It'd be interesting to see, maybe you've got this, like citations of the discussion about metal plates from contemporary.
Yeah, do you want to read this one, John?
Oh, I get to read?
Yeah.
Right, I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm teasing. So rich history of buried plates. Julie's a mind reader. All right, bullet number 1. In 1775, Indian trader James Adair described 2 brass plates and 5 copper plates found with the Takabaches Indians of North America. That's number 1. Number 2, the Reverend Thaddeus Mason Harris stated in 1805 that, quote, plates of copper have been found in some of the mounds, but they appear to be parts of armor, close quote. Quote number 3, Orsamus Turner reported that in 1809, a New York farmer plowed up an ancient record or tablet. He said it was made of copper and, quote, had engraved upon one side of it. Bullet number 4, the Philadelphia Portfolio reported in 1816 that, quote, thin plates of copper rolled up were discovered in one mound. And I'm assuming they're talking about the Indian mounds mound builder kind of stuff. All right, bullet number 5. In 1823, John Haywood described, quote, human bones of large size, think Zelf, and, quote, 2 or 3 plates of brass with characters inscribed resembling letters, close quote, found in one West Virginia mound. And then, boom, maybe this is the biggest one of all, in 1823, Ethan Smith of Poultry, Vermont. And is that the same Ethan Smith of View of the Hebrews?
Yeah, Poultney. Yeah, Poultney,
All right.
Vermont.
So
yeah.
This is the book that many people say either inspired the Book of Mormon or was inspired by the same thing that inspired the Book of Mormon, or sets of things that inspired the Book of Mormon. Ethan Smith also was a student at Dartmouth, who Joseph's brother Hiram was also a student at Dartmouth, and John Smith, some uncle or whatever of Joseph Smith, was a teacher at Dartmouth, right? These are all.
Yeah, and you have a great episode on the Dartmouth stuff, so we should put that in the show notes too.
Randy Bell, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, 1823, Ethan Smith of Poultry, Vermont. Oh, I should mention, he was Oliver Cowdery's pastor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ethan Smith of Poultney, Vermont, held that the Indians once had, quote, a book which they had for a long time preserved, but having lost the knowledge of reading it, they concluded it would be of no further use to them, and they buried it with an Indian chief. Now, that one's not mentioning metal plates. Why did you include that one, Julia? Besides the fact that Dan Vogel included it, and if Dan Vogel does it.
Oh, well, yeah. If Dan Vogel, yeah. I just was taking this directly from Dan Vogel.
But I mean, but I'm sure can we guess why he included that?
Well, yeah, because it's like basically Joseph Smith's story of the Book of Mormon. These hidden plates that were buried with an Indian chief.
But it's not plates, this one, right?
But it's a buried
Well, no,
record,
it says a book.
Right? It's a
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So bearing records, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also looking at that list. Oh, what were you going to say? Because you might be.
No, go ahead. I was going to add one more to your list, but you could go first, or do you want me to add it first?
Yeah, sure. Just go ahead and add it.
Okay, so this one, I've heard this actually on Mormon Stories. This is John Hamer. This is from a few years ago, and this is one I need to reach out to him and get the actual citation, but he's talking about how the mound builder myth is so vital to the Book of Mormon, and also how it's vital to this idea of records. And so he talks about how in an 1823 discourse to the New York Literary and Philosophical Society of New York, former New York Governor DeWitt Clinton pointed out that the story of the mound builders would be forever lost unless a record engraved on stone or metal could be found in the mounds. That's pretty close.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a former governor. It really is like I've talked to people before, and I mentioned the mound builder myth, and they go, well, did Joseph Smith know about it? And you go, yeah, everyone did. It was a very big thing. And they go, well, did he have books on it? I'm like, well, I don't know if he had books on it, but we did an episode on this where all of these really important people of the founding of America were talking about this idea. And so to what we've been saying here, this is in the milieu of Joseph Smith, and then these remarks about how the mound builders would keep records either on stone or metal that would be buried with them is remarkably close to what Joseph Smith is going to then claim is the foundation of the Book of Mormon.
Can I throw an analogy at you? And people in the comments can crucify me for butchering it. But like for years, right, films like Jurassic Park and whatever, you look at dinosaurs and you think of them as these sort of scaly, smooth things like that. And for years, the prevailing theory about dinosaurs, because, you know, soft tissues don't fossilize very well, was that they were kind of these scaly, smooth, reptile looking creatures, right? And then it's come out that some people postulated that actually dinosaurs would have feathers, very possibly like birds, right? And so then things shift and change. So the reason I bring this up is because you've got these unexplained things that the Native Americans have built, these mounds, etc., and you're coming at it with a Eurocentric point of view that, you know, these must have been white people to create such a great technology and civilization and such a, you know, sort of ordered society and whatever. So people have come up with their theory, and it's not till later that we have better ways of working out who these people were and what their society and culture was, that we then come up with a different idea. So I bring that up to say, you know, it was a pervasive idea because it was people's attempt to explain something they didn't understand. So these people weren't crazy for believing the mound builder myth. It's not something crazy. It's just was in the same way that people thought dinosaurs were smooth for a long time, right?
Yeah. And if you throw the slide back up, John, I want to point something out, that a point that Mike had made earlier. So these plates, a lot of these examples are a small. They're either one. See, the first one is 2 brass plates and then 5 plates, 5 copper plates, and then one of them is just a single roll, I think. And so these are 2 or 3 plates of brass. So again, these are very small examples. And I don't think, and I think, Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any record has been found like the one of the Book of Mormon, with 270,000 words or the equivalent thereof, that's as big as they say it is. I don't think any record has been found ever about that. Right. So like, it's just think it's interesting.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So even the examples in his milieu were not nearly as big as he later said the Book of Mormon was. So,
and we understand where they came from, because I was having a chat with, about the fact that there are deposits of copper that you can find in the States that are like, not like metals where you find them amongst stone and you have to, you know, like you have to heat this up massively to withdraw the ore. They're just lumps of copper that you could then work and smash and hit with stones and flatten out. And so that's why the Native Americans had, you know, copper artifacts. They did trade copper, and because they would find these naturally occurring like lumps essentially of just copper. It's quite wild if you Google it. But you know, so there's the grain of truth there that people have found in these burial mounds, some Native American artifacts, copper artifacts, some metal work, but they didn't have true metallurgy and they weren't making these massive blocks of text, right? So it's that grain of truth that gets then expounded upon and inflated.
right.
Yep.
Right.
And I've lost John entirely.
No, you haven't.
So this next slide I have, it shows examples from the Apocrypha, actually, which Joseph Smith. So the Smith family Bible contained the Apocrypha and the first book of Maccabee. We find this verse. It's from chapter 8, verse 22. And this is a copy of the epistle, which the Senate wrote back again in tables of brass and sent to Jerusalem, that there might have been them a memorial of peace and confederacy. And then another reference was made of brass plates in chapter 14, verses 18 through 19. And so just to point out that this was so much in Joseph's milieu, it's also in the Bible, in the scriptures that he had access to. So not only is everyone talking about it and it's in everyone's minds and they're all looking for this kind of stuff, it's also in his scriptures that we know that Joseph Smith used the Bible in his construction of the Book of Mormon. So it's just another example to me of where he would get this idea.
I mean, there's where brass plates probably come from, right? Nima,
Very well.
What are you showing us, Nemo?
I'm just holding up my copy of the Apocrypha with the appropriate verse. There you go.
That's so
Maccabees
cool.
right there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
The Apocrypha also has the name Nephi in it, I do believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
If I
interesting.
remember. Yeah, it's in the Apocrypha as well. And the Book of Tobit has a talking donkey. So I mean, this is just full of great stuff. This is what you want, guys. This is where the cool Bible stuff's at. The Apocrypha.
All right.
And so here's another example. This is from 1811. In his book, The Star in the East, published in 1811, Reverend Claudius Buchanan says that the Jews of Cochin, Indian, who Buchanan believed were remnants of the lost 10 tribes, kept a history of their journey on those parts on plates of brass. So here's another evidence that Joseph Smith was aware that they had this idea that they were keeping their records on plates of metal.
Yeah, it's all over the place. Just like
Yeah.
the mound builder myth, right? This idea of plates, buried plates, it's all over the place.
Right.
That's so fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just a few more examples that we have. So John, do you want to read this slide?
Okay. Now that I give you a hard time, I'm getting extra. Is it Nemo's turn? No, I'll do it. Thomas Hartwell Horn in 1814, in his book, quote, An Introduction of the Study of Bibliography, close quote, published in 1814, Thomas Hartwell Horn spoke of ancient plates. Quote, history indeed records tablets of lead and copper. The ancient books, quote, were covered with wax, and the writing was executed in the styles or pens made of gold, gold, silver, brass, brass, iron, copper, ivory, or bone, which at one end were pointed for the purpose of inscribing the letters, and smooth at the other extremity for the purpose of erasing. These tablets, when collected and fastened together, composed a book. Boom.
That's mental.
Right.
Gun.
What?
Smoking
Are
gun.
you talking about the pen? Yeah, that's kind of wild to me if that's
The
accurate.
pen, the idea that you would use a very soft metal like gold in order to engrave anything is bizarre, or certainly engrave on another metal. It's pretty wild.
Or to erase on metal. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, like you just it's really weird. I mean, the books were covered with wax. So are they saying that they etched into the wax? Is that the idea?
I actually am not sure what he means, but one thing that I thought was interesting is that I've heard that there was a man who recreated the gold plates for the church, and then he used beeswax to seal the sealed portion. And to where I was looking, and maybe I missed it, I haven't seen any of the witnesses describe any kind of wax. Some say it's hard like wood, but I haven't seen any wax. So I thought that was really interesting. So that's one of the reasons why I thought that this quote specifically was interesting.
Yeah. Not to sound all sophisticated, but I went to the Ashmolean Museum the other day, which is in Oxford, very old museum from the 1600s, I think it's been going. Anyway, they have a lovely exhibit there on cuneiform, which is one of the earliest systems of writing. And it's done on little clay tablets, and you take the pointy end of a reed and you press it in, and you make all these little shapes. And then they'll either, if the clay hardens, too bad, but you can reuse it and all that sort of stuff. But then when they wanted to make it last, they do it in stone, right? So this method of writing is very ancient, and this idea of taking a surface and engraving, that is the earliest form of writing we have. But to say it was done on plates of metal like this, particularly metal as precious as gold in the volume needed, again, just doesn't seem to work.
Right.
But Joseph Smith will have been aware of it. And again, that's where all these people are getting these ideas from. For anyone who wants to say, oh, well, where would they have thought this up? Engraving things on surfaces is literally the oldest way we have of writing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So silly.
Yeah. So this is a kind of a random source that I'm throwing in here because I think it's interesting, and maybe people have more thoughts in the comments. But Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Sure. In a letter written by Jesse Smith, Joseph Smith's uncle, to Hiram Smith on June the 17th, 1829, he wrote that Joseph Smith's plates were made of lead. I write this at the request of my father, not for your sake. You have not written to me. The story is that the gold book proved to be never wrote, is then crossed out, proved to be lead. That the authority have taken it, and Joe is under bonds to appear before his betters, so let it be.
So I added this one because I found it because of Dan Vogel.
Harsh.
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting. So Jesse, I don't think was very fond of Joseph Smith's church at all. From everything that I could see from him, was very antagonistic. But I thought it was really interesting. First of all, the never wrote was crossed out, and then he is describing it as being led. That was also really interesting. I don't know what to make of it. I just put it in here because it's interesting.
The gold book proved to be lead, and that's Joseph Smith's uncle.
Mhm.
Writing to Jesse.
Jesse is his uncle, and he's writing to Hiram.
Okay, writing to Hiram.
Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting.
Or 1830.
Right. Yeah. So before any of the witnesses, I guess.
Pretty early. How about why doesn't the church mention that witness?
Although to their credit, I did find it on Joseph Smith papers, so
nice.
It's there.
Nice. Thank you, Internet. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so then I think I just pulled this straight off of your website, Mike, from LDS Discussions. I don't know if you have, maybe I'll just read some of it. So this is from an Ensign article. The story is told of Joseph Smith obtaining the plates. So this is a quote from that. As he was jumping over a log, a man sprang up behind and gave him a heavy blow with a gun. Joseph turned around and knocked him to the ground, and then ran at the top of his speed. About half a mile further, he was attacked again in precisely the same way. He soon brought this one down also and ran on again. So he's literally running with these heavy plates. But before he got home, he was accosted the third time with a severe stroke with a gun. Joseph struck this third and final attacker with such force that he dislocated his own thumb. He continued running, being closely pursued until he came near his father's house, at which time his assailants, for fear of being detected, broke off the chase. So Dan Vogel has written extensively on the gold plates and believes that Joseph Smith was finishing the plates on this day and likely dislocated his thumb trying to finish the D-shaped rings that bound the sheets. That would be the final part of producing a set of metal sheets that are bound with rings, and would certainly be very difficult on the thumb as you're attempting to bend the rings into shape. In this scenario, Joseph Smith needs a cover story for his dislocated thumb that occurred while he was finishing his prop set of plates. So he rushes home with the story of being attacked 3 times by treasure seekers to account for both the injury of his thumb and the plates finally making their way back.
I like Maven shared a quote. She wrote, "I'm not a fighter, but dislocating a thumb by striking someone seems difficult."
I guess if you're like wrapping it like this, I guess it could be.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're doing.
Right, if you don't know how to fight.
One sure way to dislocate your thumb.
He could have been holding the plates and somehow lost his balance while holding the plates. But I mean, that's one of the most ridiculous stories in all of Mormonism, honestly. It rivals Ammon chopping off, 100 people's arms and carrying the arms to the king. Mike, why are you nodding?
No, it's just we covered this in the gold plates episode. I just remember at the time when you're reading it, when you're hearing it read back, it's like, oh my goodness, this is so ridiculous. And it even has the magical power of 3. Can't be attacked by 1 or 2. It has to be the power of 3. And so it's just funny how even that detail fits into that magical worldview, and just the idea that the attackers are so dumb that they're going to be like, all right, you go a half mile that way, you go a half mile the other way, one of us will get him, instead of just 3 people jumping out at once and just being like, dude, you're outnumbered. It's just guns. The whole thing. And they got guns. And Joseph Smith's just like, it's like old school Batman, like with Adam West, where he just like pow, pow, and then the guy flies and Joseph keeps running.
Hearing this story is so ingrained in my brain that I can visualize still the early episode of Mormon Stories where John's talking to Dan Vogel about this, and Dan is like sitting back in his armchair like this, like just in this armchair, like the lights going because you've been talking for like hours, and Dan Vogel's just telling this story, and I'm like, I still remember it because it's the first time when I ever heard this story and thought, hang on, did Joseph Smith just make this up? Like, that was my first moment of being like, did he just make up the plates story? Because this seems pretty wild at this point.
Maven saying that they're like the 3 stooges of villains. These 3 men attacking you.
And we talked about this in previous episodes, but like just these fake plates that I have behind me that were made from a metal lighter than gold, right?
Yep.
Made at the dimensions that the plates are described to have been. I can barely hold them with 2 hands. Yeah. Holding them with 1 is too much for me. So if I can bear, I'm 6'6".
John's a strong guy.
Most people don't know. I'm 6'6". I'm 240 pounds. If I can barely hold these plates with 2 hands, and they're lighter than gold. He's running, presumably with them in a sack, and holding them with one hand while he's fighting 3 people off, while he's running and jumping over logs.
And it's in the middle of the night, according to some of his
Yep.
his family.
So no light.
Yeah.
Like, how's he seeing where he's going?
Right.
No offense, John, but I want to start the petition to see Alan Mount reenact this with the plates.
Oh,
Because if anyone could do it,
Have you seen Brett Metcalf's biceps?
there we go.
Brett Metcalf's biceps are like my legs, my thighs.
So I say we get one of these hench individuals to give it a go, and I will happily
Yeah.
volunteer to attack them with sticks while they do so.
no, I
Are you-
mean, so
Are you saying
oh.
I'm puny, Nemo? Is that what you're saying?
Pardon?
Are you saying I'm puny? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying you're puny, John. You tower over me, but I'm just saying Alan is a mount of a man.
I lifted weights this morning.
There we go. Look at that. Who bought tickets to the gun show? Has everyone got their tickets?
Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I
we're
was
up.
just gonna say, part of my previous job was I worked with a lot of media, so DVDs, books, and I would work with pallets. And so you get these pallets of books. It's like a box this size full of books would probably weigh like 25 pounds. And we used to get usually boxes that were a little longer, and they'd be like 40, 35, because you always wanted to be under 50 for shipping reasons. The point is, I would carry those and I'd move them day after day after day. And you get to the point where you're conditioned well enough to where you could go 6-8 hours moving pretty quickly without, getting overly tired because you're doing it every day. I could not run miles with that while people are chasing me. It's just not how we work. And so, I guess from a church perspective, you'd say, well, God was with them and he powered them through, whatever. But it's just from an outside perspective, you're like, this story is so cartoonishly bad that I can't believe I ever bought it. And it's because when you're a believer, you don't think about those details.
I just wasn't told the story.
I don't know if I was either, actually.
But I think I heard the story.
I remember people saying that Joseph Smith was attacked when he was trying to get the plates back. But I don't know if I was told the details, because the details are just so... That Ensign article, when you read it, it's just like, wait, what? Like, we're really going with this? But yeah, it's crazy.
All right.
So this next part is actually a clip. I don't know if we were able to play that. So it's
Go ahead. I'll get it set up. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so in Mormon Stories, episode 1388, Trent told, and we've talked about him before, Trent told recreated a set of plates that matched the description of the plates using material that Joseph Smith would have had access to. It took Trent 2 hours to create his own set of plates. And I'll say that he's an experienced man, so his 2 hours would be different than, say, my 2 hours, who I have no experience in cutting metal or anything like that.
But Joseph wasn't short on time either, so he could have,
very true,
a number of days.
And especially when he started telling stories from the Book of Mormon as early as 1823, that would have given him 5.5 to 6 years of coming up with everything.
Yeah, once you allow for the fact that Joseph may have premeditated a lot of this and actually planned it in advance, it doesn't seem as fantastical as the church would have you believe. Because one of the things the church likes to do is to condense the time frames to make it seem more improbable.
Right, like 65 working days or something like that.
So many days, etc., etc. Whereas actually, if you, you pull it back to, well, he's been creating these peoples and stories and systems of money or whatever in his head for years, then it becomes a lot more believable.
Should I play the clip?
Yeah, go for it.
I was just filibustering for you, John.
Thank you. And is the in and out take already coded into the slide, or do I have to jump?
No, I think it should be there. I just put it there just in case.
Okay, all right, let's do it.
I know we were struggling with it yesterday.
What did you learn, and what conclusions can you draw from it?
Well, basically what I believe is it is possible. It's entirely plausible that it could be done.
He could have created the plates.
He could have. It's very easy. It's
not hard.
It's well within the skill
level. How many days do you think it took you? How many work hours did it take you to complete the plates?
To work hours on this, it only took me about 2 hours.
2 hours?
Yes.
And you're doing this with tools that were comparable to what he would have had, not high tech.
Not high tech.
No electricity.
No, if I would have put it on my plasma table or something, I could have created the whole thing in about 45 minutes.
Boom. Yeah.
Right.
Bro's flexing on us that he's got a plasma table.
And he shows the tools that he was using. He holds up copper, which would have been cheap. He holds up the tin that he used. He holds up his little scissors. I don't know what they're called, but they're to create these plates. And John's holding them up for those just listening. Now try running.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. I
want to see John run.
I thought I would go ahead and show you the plate. Help me here. I'm trying to show you the plates, but I can't because they're so freaking heavy. Here they are. Oh,
Who says we don't do comedy?
oh my god, they're so freaking heavy. Anyway, I'll show you the plates.
Yeah, and Trent that says that people guess that they're like 50 pounds, and he says I think these ones are 37 that you were just holding up. So yeah,
because
anyway,
they're unwieldy, right? They feel heavier because they're unwieldy.
They're also really
like,
sharp.
They're super heavy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, we lost Mike. Mike's he's like, we lost all credibility.
Yep.
Mike's muted.
Turned into a carry on.
Mike, you're muted.
No,
Mike, you're
no.
muted.
It's one of those things where, like I said, it's just so like it makes a lot more sense from the outsider's view than it does from the insider's view. And that you can't, as we've talked about in these episodes, you can't see that until you're willing to see it. But I mean, it really is like one of those areas where, and I've only told a few people these things because I don't really talk about this stuff to people who haven't been through the church. And when you tell them, their eyes are just like, people believe that? It's like the South Park episode. It's like, all this and you still believe it. It really is to a certain extent true because the story is just so, the gold plates are so outlandishly ridiculous. When you think about what Joseph Smith claims versus what we know historically versus what we know about the historicity of metal with long records, it just, none of it works. That's why the witnesses, to a certain extent, to me, don't matter, because all of this other stuff kind of tells you before you even get to the witnesses that the plates aren't really what they claim to be.
But I think that if you just hold up the witnesses and that's the only truth claim you ever deconstruct, I think that's enough to say that the church itself is not true, or at least the way that we have it. Because if there's no plates, then what is the Book of Mormon? It's just coming from his mind. Like,
yeah.
To some ways,
fun.
I agree with you that the plates are not important, but at the same time, without them being real, then Joseph has nothing.
No, and you're right. I think there was an interview with Richard Bushman, and they asked him something like, what's the point of even having physical plates if he didn't use them? And he basically says that I don't want to speak for him, and I might be paraphrasing a bit, but I think he effectively says that the reason for the plates is to have that physical witness of the Book of Mormon, because otherwise, to your point, it is just something that he's dictating with his head in a hat with a common everyday rock inside the hat that we're claiming is beaming words to him. Yeah. I mean,
but I guess
that's a problem.
I was gonna say, but I guess people still believe the Book of Moses, which had nothing. There's no tangible things, or the people that know the history of the church, they know that the Book of Abraham is not a literal translation, but they still believe it. So I think it's really important to deconstruct this, but at the same time, people still believe without tangible sources or evidence.
There's a person whose name many of you would know, who's a prominent let's say Mormon critic in the 80s and early 90s, who was excommunicated and then rebaptized. I won't say who still believes in the church, but believes that while there weren't, like, Joseph didn't actually get gold plates, and that while there really were ancient prophets that wrote what became the Book of Mormon, that Joseph Smith needed to create artifacts that would allow people to believe. So he created fake plates to help convince people about the records that he translated through the gift and power of God in Revelation, but he needed to forge plates to convince people otherwise. And this is a very intelligent sort of scholar, semi-scholar, who's still hanging on to belief. And that's how this person has made sense of all this.
I could have told you they're intelligent, John, and a scholar. You know why? Because that is some 11 out of 10 mental gymnastics right there. And that takes a lot of brain power to kind of to weave that narrative where it all still kind of works, right?
Yeah. It's Jonathan Haidt's point that sometimes the more intelligent you are, the more able you are to use motivated reasoning or confirmation bias to
Mhm.
convince yourself
Yeah.
and others that something's true.
Just makes you a better lawyer for your own position. That's
Yeah.
all it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and you made that point with the Heaven's Gate episode that released, is that that they go after, this cult went after intelligent people, and they wrote software, they wrote websites, or created websites, and so it's intelligent people that can still hold on to that and reason that way.
Scientology went after PhDs from, like Harvard, Stanford level PhDs. So it's yeah.
But that view is like Nemo was saying about the tricky God, to think that God is going to have Joseph make these fake plates so that people can believe something true, is just really.
At that point, why not just step on the whole, well, it's about faith thing and go, well, yeah, people are just going to have to trust that God gave it to Joseph.
Yeah.
And why should he have to make artifacts? That's what we'd say
Yeah.
about so many other things. It's like, well, why should God have to prove it to me? It's the whole Korihor thing. It's like, why are you tempting God? Why are you saying, show me a sign? Have you not had signs enough? It's like, you could say the same thing about the Book of Mormon. Read the Book of Mormon. It stands a testimony for itself. Have you not had signs enough? You don't need plates, right? The logic's there. So
Yeah.
it's a strange position to take. I can see why they would take it, but it's a strange position to take, to think that God would have Joseph create something just for the purpose of showing people so that they would believe. It's almost the thing that undermines the witnesses in some ways, from a sort of believing standpoint. It's like, well, why would we need witnesses to them? It's all about faith. So why do these people have their faith undermined by being shown it, when the whole point is we're meant to just believe without seeing?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, you got a couple more slides, Julia.
Yeah, just a couple more. So the
Home
three
stretch.
the three surviving 8 witnesses later joined the Whitmerite Church of Christ, and therefore had a strong motive to never deny their testimony of the Book of Mormon. Being a witness to a foreign language that you are not knowledgeable about, even if it is engraven on gold plates, does not mean that the translation is correct, which is something I always thought was interesting. Never denying your testimony of the Book of Mormon or the gospel is not the same as never denying that you physically saw an angel with a physical set of gold plates. Never denying your testimony does not mean that your testimony is true. And those points I've made before, and I just think they're really important, so I'm just going to hit them again.
That's good.
And then this last one I have made this point before. Even if the witnesses truly saw a set of golden plates, this does not change the fact that much of the content for the Book of Mormon is anachronistic, i.e. the Deutero-Isaiah, the Sermon on the Mount, and things like that. There were thousands of changes to the text. I think the Tanners have it at 5,000, just over 5,000. That it is not supported by archaeological or DNA evidence. That most of the ideas in the Book of Mormon coincide with materials that was available to Joseph Smith at the time. And that scholars today acknowledge that the Book of Mormon is a 19th century text.
Scholars including Richard Bushman, Terrell Givens, Fiona Givens, Patrick Mason.
Yeah.
The church's top believing scholars all agree it's a 19th century text.
Yeah. So even if they did see a set of gold plates, even if there literally was, that does not exclude all these, or exclude all these other problems.
Okay. Well, Julia, you've done an amazing job with this series. Mike, does Julia get your thumbs up? Let me see.
Yeah, no, she did a great job.
All right.
Always does a great job.
She carries on the spirit of Mike, which is hard to do, right, Nemo?
Yeah. Let's go with yeah.
She's just got to get a lot more dead inside. I think that would be the next step for her.
I was going to say, yeah, what spirit, right?
Yeah, you got to be dead inside to do this. Yeah.
Mike, if you're taking off the summer, are you coming back in the fall, or are you officially retiring?
You know what? I don't know. Like I said, there's a part of me that's just exhausted from all of this, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because I still find it interesting and fascinating. It's just kind of like, I feel like at some point it's like, how much more in depth do you need to get to show that this is just, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Can we all give Mike a round of applause for everything he's done so far? There we go. And can we give Julie a round of applause for carrying the mantle a little bit? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mike, we wish you a good summer. You're always welcome back. Nemo gets nothing because you're just Nemo.
I just turn up and proffer opinions.
Subscribe to Nemo's channel. What you can do for Nemo. Donate to Nemo the Mormon. Give him your money. So, Mike, you have a great summer. Julia, what can we look forward to from you in the weeks or months or years ahead?
Well, like I had been podcasting for a little bit, but then with school, everything went down. And so I'm hoping that because it's summertime, maybe I can get in a few episodes. And then I think TikTok is going away, right? Is that
maybe if they don't sell, if the owners
if they sell.
to an American
Okay.
family. Are you
Okay,
saying
well,
TikTok has been taking you away from what you could be doing for us?
probably.
Remember, we pay you. TikTok doesn't. Remember that, Julia.
True.
Anyway, Julia, I would love our next series to be highlighting Grant Palmer's
Yeah.
stuff, because he's a name that it's weird how, like, in 5-10 years, somebody really prominent just disappears from our memories.
Because he's not on TikTok.
Yeah, and we need to keep Grant Palmer alive. So, Julia,
Yeah.
we've got you committed to at least a few episodes on that.
Yeah. Great book.
All right. And I'll just tell everybody, in addition, one of the most important books ever written about Mormonism, it's Matt Harris. Dr. Matt Harris is about to publish a book called Second Class Saints. And it's his book about the church's treatment of Black members in the 20th century. I've already got a copy of it. Gerardo and I have been reading it. And I just want to let everybody know that book is coming out soon. We've got 4 episodes scheduled with Matt Harris, and it's going to be a banger. It's going to blow your mind. So be warned, everybody.
Banger.
It's a banger. Yeah.
Do you know when the title releases? Is it
Like July. I think it like releases to like Amazon in June, but
Okay.
it actually is available for purchase in July, I think.
That's so cool. That's exciting.
It's amazing. It's gonna blow your mind. I swear. I promise you. All right. Well, Mike, have a good summer. Any final thing you want to say, Mike? Anything you want to say?
I think when it comes to the witnesses, we did 4 episodes on it, and I've drawn a lot of parallels to like the Book of Abraham and some other stuff, because I feel like there's similarities just in terms of like how these apologetics work. But I really do feel, we talked, I think Julia hinted at this earlier. I think I mentioned this in the first episode, maybe, but we're told that God within Mormonism loves us so much that God wants all of us to come back to him so we could spend eternity with our eternal family. And it really makes you wonder why God continually sets his prophets up to look like frauds, whether it's the witnesses not being able to get their stories straight on what they saw or what they didn't see, whether it's the whole idea of gold plates, are they real, are they fake, the Book of Abraham not being what it claimed to be, prophets getting really basic information wrong. And so I guess I just kind of look at it at some point and I go, either the God of Mormonism is not real and it's a creation of Joseph Smith and the prophets after to get us to kind of comply with what they want us to do, or the God of Mormonism is true and just really, really, really doesn't care if their kids get back to him because they're intentionally throwing roadblocks up. And I guess to me, I just get to a point where I'm like, I don't need that. I don't, if I treated my kid the way the God of Mormonism kind of treats us with throwing us these horribly mixed messages. And so that's why I think to a certain extent, the witnesses don't matter, because we have those other bigger issues, but it really does shine a big light on the problem with the whole scheme of what God in Mormonism is. And obviously that's a much deeper conversation than just these final thoughts. But I do feel like all of these episodes together just show how bad and how inept the God of Mormonism is at communicating to us the correct message without having to continually issue corrections or new policies or reversing revelations via new revelations. It becomes a problem that is really insurmountable if you're willing to look at all the details. And as my final thought, watch these episodes, watch our episode on the gold plates, and then go again, search for Book of Mormon Essential presentations on gold plates. So you can kind of get a really clear view at how apologists twist and cherry pick and distort these super insignificant and uncorrelated pieces of evidence to try to make this real when it just isn't.
Love it. Thank you, Mike. You're a legend.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great summer and you stay in touch. Nemo, any final words besides Nemo?
Yeah, I mean, people should come over and subscribe. Some big things are happening in the next few weeks, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Oh, you're such a teaser.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, they have to come subscribe and find out,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And check out Analyzing Mormonism on TikTok and Instagram, right, Julia?
Yep. Yeah. For as long as TikTok's there, I guess.
You're not doing summer school, right?
No, I need a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go back in August. I already signed up for classes.
Okay. All right. Well, it'll be good to have you. Maybe a tiny bit more of you in the summer.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us today on LDS Discussions. I'll just remind you all again, that this is, I don't know, episode 55 or 56 in a series. It's best consumed sequentially. So the best thing you can do if you want to really get a sense, an objective, a dispassionate, evidence-based analysis, thoughtful, careful, in-depth analysis of Mormon Church truth claims, go to either the LDS Discussions channel on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or go to the playlist on the Mormon Stories Podcast YouTube channel, and you can consume all of these in order in their entirety. Check out ldsdiscussions.com. And then mostly I'll just say again, if you value this type of content, if you want to see it continue, we pay everyone involved. So we would appreciate your donations. You can go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and your donations will pay to all these wonderful people to do their good work, including Maven behind the scenes who's helping out, and Brooklyn and Gerardo and everyone else. So we really appreciate your donations. We've said it before, but we lose about 10 to 20 subscribers per month who lose interest, fall in financial hard times, move on, want to support other causes, whatever it is. And if we don't replace them, then we have to start cutting back on services like the LDS discussion series. We don't want to do that. So please step up and become a monthly donor if you want to see this continue. And we've got Julia ready to do an in-depth analysis of Grant Palmer's book, An Insider's View of Mormon Origins. So stay well, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.